And then in retrospect, I'm thinking perhaps would you two mind introducing yourselves?
Yep.
Is that okay? Okay. Yep. So you can start whenever you want. I just want to publicly say on YouTube and everywhere, thank you so much, both of you. I'm very excited about this topic. Lots of shares. I think a lot of people are very excited about this topic. You'll have everything from fourth graders to adults. And so, you know, our fourth graders over the summer made, or sorry, in the winter made solar ovens. So they have a little experience.
Oh, very cool.
All right. Thank you both.
Cool. I can start. So I got linked in with this because I participated in a Women in Environmental Careers panel in February. And so we're really excited that there's all these opportunities to keep learning during COVID. It's a little silver lining. And so now my coworker, my boss, is also going to present with me, and we've made it a little bit less about careers and more just about solar and our jobs in general. But yeah, so I'm Jill Rathke, and I'm currently a business development associate, same as Miles at Soul Systems. And Soul Systems is a commercial, industrial, and municipal, those are typical customers, solar and battery storage developer. So we're based in Washington, DC, but we develop projects all across the United States. And we are both on the business development sort of sales team. So we work on creating proposals and doing preliminary diligence. And then if we win projects, then we have a whole other team that manages construction, and we actually own a lot of the projects long term. So.
And while we do bid on projects, Jill mentioned winning projects, we also have a very vast business development team that also goes out to market and tries to, you know, build upon our pipeline there. So definitely multiple ways to develop solar and get to those customers.
Cool.
Yeah, no.
So the next slide also shows some pictures, but we can talk a little bit about how we ended up at Soul Systems and why we really enjoy our jobs, and then talk a little bit about solar in general. So I briefly mentioned some of the things that we usually do day to day, creating proposals, doing financial modeling to make sure that we're offering a customer a good deal, basically, so we can save them money. And then because there's so many different policies at the state and the federal level, it's pretty complicated to navigate all of this. So that's our jobs to understand this, especially during these crazy times where things change so quickly. And I'll let Miles add on and maybe talk about this other program we were doing.
Yeah, so Jill and I, as of yesterday, are current graduates of the certificate in financing and deploying clean energy program at Yale, which was a joint venture between the Yale School of Management and the Yale School of Forestry and Environment. They formed this coalition called Center for Business and Environment at Yale. They offered several certificate programs. This happened to be a year-long course where we learned about project finance, innovation, technology transitions, and clean energy policy, all under the umbrella of clean energy, and how that, you know, really we wanted to drive the financing and deploying of these projects, and just learning how we can accelerate that process. So something really relevant to what we do every day, and really helpful just to get that sort of background, because clean energy isn't really a topic that's offered per se in undergraduate curriculums. You know, there are definitely classes that you can take that are specific to that, but not really a whole major or really dedicated course load that's dedicated to that. So this was really helpful in giving us more background and allowing us to implement some of the things we learned in our daily work, which is always really cool.
Yeah. So that's me in that picture, but so this was actually Soul Systems, which was actually my first real job after I graduated college. But before working at Soul Systems, which is like the private business side, I had also worked at the Solar Energy Industries Association, which is the big trade association advocating for the entire solar industry based in Washington, D.C. And so it was really cool to learn about how policies are developed and what lobbying's like, how important jobs are, and the industry as a whole for the whole US economy and the global economy as well. But I also came from a sustainability and environmental background. And so in college and growing up, just environmentalism as a whole was really important to me. And so I was trying to understand if I wanted to do more general environmental advocacy or focus on the private sector. And so it was really fun throughout college to try out different careers through internships. But I'm really happy being at Soul Systems now because the private sector is a little more fast moving. And so it's fun to be empowered in that way.
And so I developed my clean energy interests really in high school. My math teacher, my high school math teacher, Mr. Stevens, bought a Chevy Volt in 2011. And at the time that was like revolutionary. This car that completely ran on electricity. So every day he would come in and write tally marks on the chalkboard for every day he didn't have to purchase gas. And then, he was also a robotics teacher, and one of my mentors being a Black male teacher. So me and my best friend would stay after school and go over these statistics. Okay, if there were 10,000 Mr. Stevens in the world, how much money would they save? What would the carbon emissions outlook look like? So that was something that really piqued my interest in clean energy, and definitely a step in the right direction in wanting to get involved with that. And then in high school, I ended up doing my extended essay in the International Baccalaureate IB program on how does the shape and texture of an object affect its qualitative movement through air. So I built this miniature wind tunnel to kind of show different efficiencies and inefficiencies in the aerodynamics of designs of cars. And, if, there's more curvature in the structure of cars, how does that affect the emissions output there? So, there are definitely several things you can do in school to kind of show your interest in this and really get involved with clean energy, even though you're not deploying solar like Jill and I are. It's really baby steps into getting there. So, this is one example of a project that you can do, or, there's, building solar ovens is really cool as well. So definitely some cool school projects you can do to show your interest in clean energy. But yeah, so I interned for a couple of really a lot of public sector positions with the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy, the D.C. Department of Energy and Environment, which is more local, Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. And I really found out that, I really like the fast-paced moving of the private sector a little more. And that's kind of how I ended up at Soul Systems. But definitely recommend, I know some of you guys are young, but, get as much experience while you can, and really utilize that experience to leverage your future career and your passion. So yeah, just a couple tips.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's cool too to note that Miles has all this like technical knowledge, but also is working at the public sector. And I came much less from a technical background and like never took a physics class after high school, but was involved with the sustainability department and more like public advocacy when I was in college. So I think no matter what you're good at, whether it's math or writing or just talking to people, if you're passionate about renewable energy, then you can find your place. So cool.
Great point, Jill.
Cool. Well, I'll let Miles quickly explain exactly how solar energy works.
So solar energy, solar panels are really cool. There are a bunch of different types of solar panels. We'll talk about the main type in which we implement and what's most popular in the world right now is a monosilicon based technology. And without getting in too much of the weeds here, basically when a photon hits the solar panel, the face of the solar panel, and this photon can be from the sun, or a photon is just a particle of energy of light, pretty much. So that could be from an LED light bulb. Now the photons won't be as intense from LED light bulbs as the sun, but any type of photon that hits this solar panel will excite some of the electrons or excite the atoms in one of the layers of the solar panel, and then through that an electron actually bounces off. So there are two different layers. Typically there's an N type and a P type. Don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but what that does is one of those has an excess of electrons and one of those has more electrons than needed. So the layer that has more electrons will use that electron to transfer through the layer that has less electrons. And then that kind of creates a steady flow of electrons, and then that's captured through a backplate and then transferred through wires to whichever item of load, whether that's a battery, whether you're storing those electrons somewhere, or going directly to an electric facility where you're immediately using those electrons. And that flow of electrons is electricity, and that's really how electricity works. But yeah, photons, electrons, all that cool stuff. And it's, we call this renewable energy because the sun is a source that's always going to be there, hopefully. So, every morning you expect the sun to be up. So, this is a source that you're not having to create, and this is just part of nature that you can utilize for the benefit of the world. So.
And Miles just mentioned that sometimes the electrons go into a battery. And that's kind of a really cool new topic in the clean energy industry right now. Because if you don't have something, your light bulb isn't turned on while the solar energy is producing, then you might lose the electrons basically if they're not being used immediately. But a cool alternative to storing them in a battery and then using them later on is matching different types of generation on a huge sort of grid level. So one cool way to match two different types of renewable energy is to combine solar and wind, because wind it's usually really windy at night. Maybe none of you guys play outside that much at night, but and I honestly didn't even think about it until I worked in this industry. But the times that it's usually really windy are often the opposite times that it's usually really sunny, and so it creates a great balance. If you want to leave your light on all day, you could have a wind and a solar source, and could kind of balance out the generation with the load that you're using the electricity at. So I don't really know that much about the technical side of wind energy, but I'm sure most of you guys have heard of a wind turbine or understand the concept that the wind moves the turbines, and then that energy is transferred from mechanical energy to electrical energy. And yeah, so our company doesn't do as much with wind energy. We usually do like medium-sized solar projects, and wind turbines are usually really big and in a larger scale. But it's still a really cool topic. Do you have anything else on wind, Miles?
Nope. I think you touched on all the major points: mechanical, kinetic energy turning into electricity. Yeah, that's about the gist of wind. I know too. So
yeah. Cool. Well, the next thing, we can kind of talk about our process and how we decide where the best place to build a solar array would be. We usually look at projects that are 1 to 10 megawatts, which probably means nothing to any of you, but that might be between like 5 and 30 acres of land, or like a 200 square foot rooftops. So one of those huge Amazon fulfillment center warehouses is like a great rooftop for us to put solar on. And so we work in the entire US. So it's important for us to use our resources wisely and to figure out where best we want to develop projects. So sometimes we'll look at maps like this, which this one seems to be a low quality map, so sorry about that. But it just shows where it's really sunny in the US. The dark red is the sunniest, and then the yellow is the least sunny. But there's also many policies that would lead us to develop projects, and I'll let Miles maybe talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so when it comes to choosing a solar site, we definitely look for several factors. Obviously, if you look in the West Coast, you can see there's a lot more solar intensity there in some of those regions like Arizona and California. And that's maybe why California has one of the most robust solar incentive and just solar programs in the country. So, while we do have projects in Arizona, some of our or California, most of our markets are in the Midwest and Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. So I guess there are a couple factors that go into building a solar project that can be interconnection. How are we going to connect this system to either the grid or the electricity utility grid, or back to the customer's electrical room per se, where that would be behind the meter versus in front of the meter. It's kind of getting into the weeds there. Probably don't need to talk about, but yeah. So there needs to be certain level of hosting capacity if we're doing in front of the meter, where we can actually install the system, and there's actually enough room on the feeder lines that you see on these towers. Most of them have like 3 to 6 lines. I'm sure you've seen them before, but yeah, there has to be enough capacity on there where we can actually host the electrons and put them through that go back to a substation. But that's just one factor. We have to have the land to build solar, or the rooftop space, or we also build solar in parking lots through carports, which is a really cool way to enhance a parking lot and utilize that space. And yeah, this is a slide showing solar array in not really sure what's going on around there, but it looks like there may be some sort of forest or floodplain to the south that we're trying to avoid. And we have solar position right here. We've done diligence to see, okay, we can't build in certain flood zones that are likely to flood when there's excess rain, or a scenario like that. And we can't build solar in I just said that.
Wetlands.
Wetlands, yeah, and wetlands. So we've done diligence there to make sure that there's, no, we're not going against any state regulation, and that we're actually zoned to build solar in this parcel. So yeah, this would be some of the engineering due diligence we do beforehand, before even picking a site to build solar on.
Yeah. And so Miles was talking about how sometimes we respond to these bids that are really competitive, and then we win a project, or sometimes we go direct to the customer. But usually we like to ask customers for more information about their building or their site. So these white overlays on the map were like some maps that the customer already had. This is actually for a university. And so it was some land that they owned. And so all of those lines show different delineations of floodplains, wetlands, endangered species, which is also things we want to be careful of and let them have their habitat. So yeah, it's good to do the diligence, and often we'll work with a customer to figure out if they have 100 acres of land, where best we could put the solar array, or where best, if they have a bunch of parking lots, where best to put it. But one last thing, we often look at specific policies as well. And so certain states have prioritized renewable energy as one of their goals. And so they'll set like a renewable energy goal and create a market for us. And then they'll basically pay us a little bit of extra money per kilowatt hour generated, like per electron, basically, if we can prove that it was renewable. And so that's like their way of incentivizing people to build these renewable projects. And there's many other incentives, since they just give you a big cash grant upfront when you're building a project, just to help you pay for the construction, and then you can sort of operate it how you want afterwards. But that's another reason why we're mostly in the Northeast, and Illinois has a very well-recognized solar program called the Adjustable Block Program. So we're actually developing like 8 projects in Illinois right now throughout the state, because the government has made it a priority, which is awesome. So yeah. Got a couple more slides. Here's, oops. This is just a couple different projects that we've built, but Miles was mentioning the parking canopy carport. That's the one in the bottom left. And this is actually like a digital rendering that we got done to show a customer what it would look like to have the parking canopy on their parking lot, which was, we don't do that for a ton of projects. So it was honestly just really fun for me to see, because it reminded me of like a video game or something. But yeah, you can see how big that one solar array in the bottom right is, but we'll do something as small as the one on the left. So really just about making sure we can save the customers money in some way. Yeah.
And
What
for
else?
the bottom picture on the bottom right, you may wonder why there are all these lines going through the solar array. So we actually create drive aisles to make sure there's easy access, where we can fix the system if something goes wrong, or while we're building it, we want to have dedicated aisles to big trucks moving solar equipment, so they have easy access up and down, and not having to accidentally bump into some panels and end up ruining the whole system. So most of our large ground mount arrays, which this is, will have these drive aisles. Is this a single axis tracking?
I'm not sure. I think it's a fixed tilt, but I'll let you explain what the tracking means.
Sure. So is there two, really, I guess, 3 types of ground mounted solar arrays that we build. There's fixed tilt, which is just set in one position. And then there's single axis tracking, which actually follows. So the sun rises in the east and sets in the west every day. Single axis tracking panels are able to like physically move and track the sun throughout the day, increasing solar production, which is really cool. And then the third type, which is kind of a hybrid, which we could put on single axis tracking and fixed tilt, is the use of bifacial panels. So bifacial panels are able to capture sunlight from the front side of the panel and then reflection on the back side of the panel coming from the gaps in the rows, and the sunlight bouncing off of that gap and hitting back the back plate of the panel. So that increases, efficiency even more, on the lines of another 4 to 8%. And that can really be helpful in helping the financials of the project, just generating more power. So those are 3 different types of ground mount arrays that we're accustomed to building.
Cool. We have a couple more slides, but the next couple are less about Miles and I's jobs and more just about cool things in the industry. And then we can do some questions. So dreams for the future is more, I had made this PowerPoint when I was talking about my career. So I was thinking about where I wanted to work later on in my life. And so I think doing, well, just international is really cool because you get to travel, but there's a lot of different applications of renewable energy at larger or smaller scales across the world. And so in the US, we have like these very specific policies that are incentivizing certain things. But at the end of the day, like all of us already have electricity. And so we're just finding ways to make it cheaper or more environmentally friendly, which is really important. But renewables are also awesome because, like Miles said, you never run out of sunlight, and you can get it anywhere. So I think a place that I think renewable energy can have a really large impact is places where there isn't an already existing electric grid, and so people's homes don't have lights to turn on easily, and electricity is a lot more expensive because they're so remote. So this picture is from a group called Solar Sister, which I just know about because I have a friend that works there, but they have really small scale lanterns or solar arrays that can go on homes. And their mission is to empower women through renewable energy. And so by allowing people to have electricity more easily, or even these women are enabled and empowered by being the business development salespeople. So they have some extra income that can really like change lives and change communities. And so I think that's really important and yeah, something that I want to do in the future. Another cool thing is just battery storage. It's really important for our jobs right now because now customers really want it. So everyone's asking about battery storage and wants to know how they could maybe pair it with energy or with solar energy, or maybe have it stand alone. But it seems to be a lot more complicated. And so part of me and Miles' job is trying to work with other partners who already know a lot about it. But it's something that I'm really excited about learning, especially in the short term at my job at Soul Systems. I'll let Miles talk about what he wants to do in the future too.
Oh, say that again. Sorry, Jill.
I said I'll let Miles talk about what he wants to do in the future.
In the future, in terms of
like your career, what you're excited to learn about.
What I'm excited to learn about.
Yeah.
I think the technology transitions. Some of the things we learned there in the Yale course was really impactful. And something that Soul Systems is definitely looking to do in the next 3 to 4 years is expand our technology reach and our impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So down the line, that could mean developing hydropower, using battery storage with that. I specifically had come from So before Soul Systems, I had been with a biogas developer who developed anaerobic digestion technology, converting animal manure into electricity through anaerobic digestion, which was really cool. So, maybe that's something renewable energy developer like Soul Systems can implement down the line. I think there's a lot of benefits there, especially in the DMV region, where there's a lot of potential for well, one, there's a lot of chicken farms, and two, there's a lot of bad nutrients going back into the Chesapeake Bay because they're farmers are using manure fertilizers instead of using a customized fertilizer that goes back, and those bad nutrients are getting leached back into the Chesapeake Bay. So definitely think there's some opportunity there. But battery storage is really impressive. Jill has gotten a lot of knowledge on that recently, and has really helped our team kind of shape our value proposition around battery storage. So that's definitely something that will be implemented in not only solar but multiple technologies in the future.
Yeah. The last slide is just talking, which we've kind of hinted at, is just there's really like endless opportunities if you want to work in renewable energy. You could work at a small business, you could work at the big government, for-profit, nonprofit, and there's just like so many different pathways. So it's honestly a little overwhelming, and it was to me when I was looking at jobs. And I mean, you can always transition. It's never boring because it's always changing, but we can just like leave this slide up there and go to questions unless you have anything to add on this, Miles.
Yeah, and like Jill said, if you're passionate about clean energy and sustainability, there's no specific skill set that you have to have. I think there's so many positions in clean energy, whether it's policy, insurance, engineering, finance. There's so many spectrums of different parties involved in building these projects and making sure they're operating well. So, if this is something you're passionate about, there are definitely multiple ways to get involved. So, just work on honing the skill set that you see that you have the most aptitude in, and that will translate into a career in clean energy if that's what you're interested in the future.
Well, we can open up to questions.
Cool. So it looks like we have some questions already, quite a few. First question, is there something we can do to influence the Department of Energy to support solar energy? Great question. So not to get too much into politics, but I interned for the U.S. Department of Energy for 3 months in 2017. 2017, and that was definitely an interesting time because they were kind of shifting from the former president's group of people in the office to the current president's group of people in the Department of Energy office. And a lot of the solar programs were being decommissioned while I was there, which was kind of bummy. I would say, you guys the fourth graders can't vote right now, but when you can, you definitely, if you're interested in clean energy, you want someone in office who's keen to that as well. So that's, policy is a big issue, especially when dealing with these government, big public entities like the Department of Energy. And that's going to be one of the driving forces in what type of clean energy, solar policy, solar programs are coming out of these offices, and do they have the funding to implement them? So yeah, that's all I have on that. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Joe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, local policy is also really important. Montgomery County in Maryland, which is one of the counties right outside of DC, actually has its own county green bank. And I won't go like too in detail on what that means. You can look it up later. But they like set aside money at the county level to invest in renewable energy and green projects. So, and maybe local policy honestly gets passed more quickly. So just, yeah, influence your local legislators and make sure they advocate for all the jobs and economic benefits that renewable energy provides, as well as environmental.
Yep. And when you're able to get internships or apply for internships, definitely check out your local governments because you will have a lot of say and be able to help and learn a lot from diligence being done there. I was an intern while they were making the Montgomery County Green Bank, which was really cool. So got to learn a lot about green banks and really got to help push that mission, which was really awesome and helpful for my career. So definitely get involved. Internships are a great way to get involved. So the next question is, do people really have a choice to be on grid or off grid? Jill, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So we quickly talked about international solar, and I think in a lot of places, when people are off the grid and don't have access, I don't really think there's that much of a choice. But there are people in the US, maybe some of your neighbors, that want to be off the grid, and so maybe they want, if like a power line gets knocked down by a tree in their neighborhood, they want to be able to like isolate their own home and it's called a microgrid. And so then basically their power, if they had a solar array, then they could isolate their own home's grid, and then their solar would still just be charging their house. So I think maybe that's also what this question is asking. And in that situation, you do have a choice if you want to create a microgrid, although it does cost some money. And so I don't think it's necessary to have your own microgrid at your house or in your neighborhood to have renewable energy. But there's benefits to it. So another cool topic.
So the third question, going through these things, is there a way to support solar if you rent and your landlord doesn't want to put panels, or you live in an apartment? Yes, there's community solar, and community solar is typical. I guess it can be rooftop, ground mounted, or a carport system, really. But it's a way where residential tenants can subscribe to the system and get the same credits or benefits that they would see if that system was on their roof, for example. Maybe not exactly the same through like a power purchase agreement and different construction needed there, but it is a way to support solar, get the same credits, and then the rest of that system generation is being subscribed to in a commercial tenant, and typically that's a larger entity that's taking the majority, or around 40% of that generation from the community solar system. But community solar is an awesome way to get involved for residents who can't necessarily put solar on their roof, but can subscribe and get some of the benefits through solar there.
And if that's something that someone's really interested in, there's a lot of sort of like billing programs. There's a bunch of software companies that will aggregate maybe your already existing electric bill at your house with this community solar provider. And so it's really simple. So if you just like search Community Solar Illinois, they have a great program. And it's actually not, it sounds really complicated, but it's not too hard to get the credits and save money on your utility bills.
Yeah. Next question. Do states have organizations to support those of us interested but new to solar? Where do we go for good information? That's a good question. I mean, there are a bunch of specific state programs. I definitely start off with just Googling, your state and then solar to see if, there's any programs there or specific educational efforts that they're putting out to help educate the public on solar and how to get involved. So I'd start there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add there, Jill.
The Solar Energy Industries Association was the group that I worked for, and so they have like local state chapters. But it's maybe a little bit more broad. So also, even though sometimes I feel like salespeople get a bad rep that they're trying to like trick you into something, just talking to a couple different solar residential companies that will install for you is a good way to understand what the different offerings are. Or if you want to get community solar credits. So it may also be helpful to talk to local companies that are offering services to you.
Awesome. The next question, can you explain what net metering is? That's a great question. I can pass that one off to you, Jill, if you want.
Okay. Well, so net metering is not, it's not legal in every state. And so each state has different policies on it. For example, in Florida, it's actually illegal, which is unfortunate because Florida is really sunny. But it doesn't mean solar is not possible. The concept of net metering is that your solar array is producing a lot during the middle of the day and then nothing at night. But at your house, you're either using electricity all day, the same amount, or having peaks of load, at night when you're all watching TV and cooking dinner. So if you were to look at the physical electrons going from the solar array to your house, it wouldn't perfectly match the load and demand. But utilities, luckily, have these huge distribution grids and all the electricity and wires are all connected. So they, even if you produce extra solar during the day, they can offtake that from your house and like disperse it across the grid, and vice versa. If you need electricity at night, they can bring it to you. So the concept of net metering, the meter is just the meter at your house measuring how much electricity you're using and how much electricity the solar array is producing. And the concept of net means that the utility will allow you to net the electricity produced in a year with the amount of electricity you've used in a whole year, rather than like looking at just the day. And so
I think you're a little frozen there, Jill.
the array only produces half of that. Yeah. Can you hear me?
You're good now. You're good.
Oh, okay. Cool. Oh, yeah. Still good?
Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, anyway, so the concept is that it gets netted, and so it's just evened out on an annual level, which is really good for solar owners because then you still kind of get credit and like compensated for all that solar you produced, even if you didn't use enough electricity at your house to offset that.
That was 100 times better than I would have explained it. So thanks, Joe. The next question is pretty robust. In the business of project finance, have you seen general trends? You good, Joe? Sorry.
Yeah, it did just freeze for me, but I'll let you keep talking.
Okay. I was just going to the next question. In the business of project finance, have you seen general trends towards different forms of PV? I heard that that concentrator PV and multifunction have grown unpopular over the decades as silicon has gotten cheaper, but would be interested in hearing certain projects that you have financed that are non-silicon and how they're more beneficial than silicon. Great question. Looks like you're ahead of the curve already, knowing about these different solar technologies. So we at Soul Systems have only experienced developing silicon-based solar technology, and they're, really the main driver in that is cost. And obviously that affects the project finance and what we're charging customers to pay for electricity. And really the main driver there is we want to be able to come below the rate of electricity that our customers are currently paying so that they can see some savings on electricity throughout the lifetime of the project. And with more expensive builds like concentrator PV or I forget what the mirror technology is called, but different forms of PV, they're really expensive to build and have a lot of big upfront costs. And typically, you know, if we're looking at specific customers in the commercial industrial space, which, you know, are our customers majorly, you know, we wouldn't be able to provide them with a price of power under their current rate of electricity with those technologies. And in places we potentially can with higher solar yields, like Arizona, for example, they're not really there's not the incentive structure around to compensate us for those expensive builds. So that would be my stab at it, and why we really focus on the silicon-based technology, and really that's our wheelhouse.
I was gonna pull up a picture of what concentrated solar power is. I don't know if anybody knows what it is, but it's pretty crazy. It's basically huge numbers of mirrors.
Oh yeah.
And a huge tower of, I think it's water that they concentrate all of the light and bounce off the mirrors and heat up the water, and then I think they use the steam and then run like a steam turbine, and that's how they get electricity. But there's all these, I mean, it's kind of beautiful and really crazy. And there's also stories, unfortunately, of like birds. It's so hot nearby that birds will like fly through and like burn their wings and stuff. So I think there's also a lot of just like general public opinion, not necessarily problems, but places for improvement with concentrated solar power. But it is really cool.
And I was reading an article on this that was kind of demystifying the whole bird theory. But then at the end of the article, they're still like, yeah, you know, a typical project will kill like 250 birds over its lifetime. And I'm like, that's no small number of birds.
A lot of birds.
So yeah, that's a lot of birds. But yeah, this technology is typically suited for utility scale, giving renewable power back to utilities. And you know, that's something that we don't really do on our development side. And you know, a project like this we would really have to specialize in this sort of technology to deliver this on a consistent basis. But it's completely different than just slapping some solar panels and some mounting down. Yeah, this is really involved. So just expertise, the project financing side, and just the technology involved and the cost. So hope that answered your question, Kyle.
The last question is, do solar panels get recycled? Right now, it's interesting because solar panels have a very long life, and so they could last for 30 years without falling apart and needing to be thrown away or recycled. So there's actually not that many really old solar projects where panels need to be disposed of, but this is a big hot topic in the industry as projects get older. And so I think it's really important for recycling facilities to get created. And there's definitely some behind the scenes innovation right now, figuring out how to make sure that all the sort of like the rare earth materials, I know like copper wiring is very valuable, to make sure they get recycled and reused.
Yeah, great point, Jill. A lot of the majority of the solar projects in the U.S. right now are still active and still being developed. So, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see an influx in the amount of companies who are specifically basing their business models off of solar recycling. And that deals with, you know, whether that's the silicon, the metal, really the copper and the wire, the materials that go into the wiring is probably most easily recyclable and most valuable. So yeah, we'll definitely hear about that in much more detail in the coming years when a lot of these projects have to be decommissioned because they, you know, have degraded to an extent. So yeah, looks like that's the end of the questions. Thanks so much for letting us come on and talk about what we do every day and our careers and how we got there, and hopefully we were able to influence some people on being involved in solar, whether that's starting a career in clean energy or you know, just getting involved through community solar or installing solar on your own roof or funding a project there. So thanks so much and really appreciate the time today.
Thank you both for being here. I think everybody watching thought that was amazing and super informative. Do you have any advice for people who are looking to get into the field, like what they can do to kind of make their way in when it's not necessarily the biggest push by our government right now?
I would say, well, there's a lot of cool for like high school and college and adults. There's like an incredible wealth of podcasts and really interesting websites with like newsletters. So that'd be a great way to learn a lot before you're ready to start applying for jobs. Green Tech Media is the one that I reference the most. That's a website that has renewable energy news, and the articles are just really well written and like not dry at all. So they're very interesting. But I do think there's, like Miles was mentioning this, there's not a lot of like formalized programs in college or training programs. So definitely just talking to as many people as you can and trying to get advice on how to learn is a good way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, definitely, Jill. And for high school, college students and even postgraduate students, I would say, you know, get involved with volunteering. You know, even if it's with your local Department of Environment or Environmental Protection, you know, just reach out and ask if you could do an unpaid internship or something like that, just to kick off your career. That's something that really helped me. I had 3 unpaid internships in college and really seeing the return on that now. But during that time, I wish I had gotten paid, but it was really helpful for my career and learned so much and made really develop that network with professionals already in clean energy. So, you know, just trying to get involved with any professional groups or internships and things like that, I think is really helpful moving forward.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
For having us. This was super fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.